Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Ihsan.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And today it is February 15th, 2023, as we record
Yeah.
this, and it's episode 102 of the podcast. Our main topic today is professional relationships, when to ditch them and when to nurture them. We don't have any new patrons this week, but you can go to patreon.com/Valerie Ihsan and get a bunch of goodies for as low as $1 a month.
$1 a month.
$1 a month.
That's not a lot.
That's not a lot.
No, it's a good deal.
What does your first tier start at?
It's $3. That's the first tier for me, but I've actually considered, like, why not do $1 tier and then just see if you
Some
can.
people say don't ever start with $1. Start with at least $2 or $3 because
Right.
it's a good entry and somebody will, people will join in your first tier at least.
I looked at it like a cup of coffee, right? Like I'm going to do this for the price of a decent cup of coffee, but then, maybe I should do it for the price of a newspaper. Who knows?
We have a comment from a listener, and I'm going to butcher
right.
your name. I'm really sorry, Jason. So Jason Meuschke. I don't know. The spelling will be in the show notes. He's a thriller author and a podcast host. He hosts the Sampled Chapter podcast, and he sent in a message. He says, for a while now, I've been meaning to congratulate you both on 100 episodes. I found the show last summer and became a fan right away. Keep up the great work. So that was really fun. I love getting fan mail. Thanks so much, Jason.
Yay. And Sample Chapter podcast is going to go on my sample. So I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, I was listening to it the other day. Okay, there is a question actually several questions from a listener. Chad Boyer says, what is your favorite checklist in general?
My favorite checklist.
Yes, and this is directed, there's two questions directed at me and one for you, but you can certainly answer any of them too. So favorite checklist.
That had to be directed at you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what my favorite checklist is. Dude, I make checklists every day. I mean, even just my to-do list checklist. The one that I use quite frequently actually is my packing checklist. So I have a packing, there's a whole suite of packing checklists actually. So I've got one for general luggage. I've got one for the carry-on bag. I've got one for what you do in the house and for pets, like before you go, what needs to be done before you leave. And I actually wrote one specifically for attending conferences too, because there's extra stuff, that you bring, business wise, like business cards or, marketing or merch or whatever. So I would say I don't know if it's my favorite, but the one I use a lot is the packing checklist. And then my favorite checklist for writing, it's just the one I use for writing. I have a writing and publishing checklist, and I print it out every time I start a new project, and I just go through the list. So that's that one. I have provided that for as a reader magnet, as a sign up for my, I used to have it on my website. Right now the story rubric is there, but if anybody listening wants the publishing and writing checklist that I use, just email us writercraftpodcast@gmail.com and I'll send it to you.
I have that checklist.
Extensive though, I have to say.
It's a pretty good one. I would say I'm not as much of a checklist person as I am like a frantic to-do list person. I make a to-do list every day, and usually sometimes twice. But I love your checklist because they are so exhaustive and they are so
exhausting too.
No. Well, I think I don't know. You could, the joke is that it's exhausting, but in reality, it's good to look, like, it just shows you things from every angle. And I think that's important when you're doing something like publishing a book or writing a book, you have to have.
And you don't have to do all the things on it. This is just what I do. And maybe it'll trigger some ideas,
right. That's the way I've used it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Eric,
do
you have a favorite checklist since you know me? Or if he doesn't, what checklist would he love to have or need this year?
Well, that's terrific. I'm not a big checklist person. I I operate under the delusion that I'm just going to remember all the steps every time, and that's not reality anymore. And I'm not saying that's not like the anymore part isn't that like, oh, you're getting old and you can't remember everything you got to remember. It's more like there are so many things to do. And
Mhm.
one of the hardest things for me as a content creator is like to see that when I look at things that I do, like not doing them consistently, that comes from a lack of a checklist. That comes from a lack of like a process that I have every time I do something. So the checklist that I'm working on right now, um, I could grab the yellow notepad and show it to anybody who's looking. Like I'm starting to develop what I do. I can write the story, and that I don't need a checklist for. But what I need is when am I updating my documents? Like I have a series document. When am I going to update that? What are the steps to putting the book out? Like what are the layout steps and the pages? So I've just created some sort of templating
Mhm.
um, ideas now because I'm putting out a new book soon. Valerie's going to get a book from me at the end of the week, and I need to. So I'm going to use this publishing this novella as like this is my checklist. This is what every book is going to look like. This is what every book's going to have. And these are the updates I'm going to make on every book with every publication, because you have to do that when you add something in your series. You need to make sure that every book in the series has mention of that new thing. Anyway, I am now working on the publication checklist, so I become consistent, and consistence always something I strive for, and
Mhm.
consistency is hard. It's just
Yeah.
so yeah.
All right. Announcement about the Writercraft Writing Retreat. I have one ticket left. That's it. So if you want to come to the writing or Writercraft Writing Retreat this August 24th to the 27th, the tickets include all lodging, gourmet meals, instruction, coaching, retreat time on the river in Marcola, Oregon. We'll be touching on book structure, story hypothesis, plotting that doesn't hurt, author action plans, and more. The price right now is $850. It hasn't even gone into the regular price. The regular price for the ticket this time was 900, and nobody's paid that because all the tickets are selling out. So, and alumni and patron prices are 775. So monthly payments are an option. You can contact me for any questions. But yeah, one ticket left. We need topic suggestions and interviewee suggestions too. So we'd like to start interviewing people on the podcast once a month, and we think that would be a fun addition. So if you have anybody that you would like us to interview, or if you are interested in being interviewed, please contact us at writercraftpodcast@gmail.com. Eric, I'm still panicking about the
Oh,
cover.
no.
I haven't received the cover yet. And this morning I had this idea because I I had ordered 3 separate print covers, one for the large print edition, one for the hardcover edition, and one for the paperback edition. So it occurred to me that that's 3 times the work. It's not, you know, because they're all different trim sizes. So it's not
Right.
just like, oh, stick on the large cover, or large print
Large print
sticker or
covers.
something,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's all different trim sizes. So it actually is 3 jobs instead of just
Yes.
the one. So it occurred to me this morning that I could just ask for one. Can you just send me one right now? I need at least one right now.
Right. Right.
And yeah, so I don't know which one I mean, the large print can be later, but
Yeah.
I
That one.
love hardcovers, but usually, most people prefer paperbacks. It's more cost effective, and they're smaller, they're lighter, they're easier to carry, and whatever. So I think probably if I had to pick one and I could only get one before the event, which is my book launch
Book
party on
launch
March
party.
11th from 6 to 9 or 6 to 8 p.m. at Tsunami
The band has
Books.
already shown up, right? They're already
The
there.
band's already booked and everything. So
The band's
the
there.
band is booked.
I say, you were gonna say if you had a choice. I think you don't really have the choice, and I think you're got to go with that, the paperback cover.
The paperback. Okay. So
That
I
only
will
makes sense.
email the designer today and say, please at least send the paperback, cover, and so I can get that uploaded and out.
Which is a shame, right? Because most of the hardbacks are going to sell in the first round, the first print. Not that we're doing these big editions.
I really wanted at the launch party to have stacks of all three, so people could choose whichever format they wanted. And working in the bookstore, we did have, and a lot of elders flock to this particular bookstore that I worked at, because it'd been around for 27 years and it was a neighborhood bookstore. And so they've just been coming for like 15, 17, 20 years. And so they've grown up with the bookstore. And a lot of them come in and be like, how come nobody does large print editions? I just can't, I want the paperback. I don't like e-readers. I wish that they would just all come large print. So there's a hint, there's a tip for anybody listening. Make sure you're adding large print editions to all of the books that you put out, because they are needed and they are wanted by your audience.
And remember, I'm just going to put I'm not going to put all of your mind at ease with anything I say. I know the anxiety around all of this, but this isn't going to be your only event. You're going to do other events. You're going to sign books at other things throughout the year. So at the launch, you might only have the paperback, but you will show up at something in the summer and you're going to have all three. You'll have that table that you're envisioning. It's just maybe not this time.
Which would be a drag, because I don't know, like, I want to do my bookstore owner proud, because I work with him and I respect him, and I want to have like the best products out. I want him to be proud of what I've done, so it's totally ego. I know, but I have sent
but in the
out,
right place. That's in the right place.
Yeah, I think so. I've sent out all the arcs that people have requested, although I did just remember one. So I wrote it down as I was saying hello to you this morning. So I have one more to send out. But if anybody still wants an arc of the memoir, just hit me up, let me know, and I'll send you a digital copy. What about you? What's your author update?
Yeah. So as I've discussed, I rewrote I wrote a new novella in my book series that will be the giveaway book. It's a prequel to the first novel. I don't know what the right terminology for it. It comes before novel number one, story-wise. So I'm finished with that. Actually, I'm just giving it one last look through. I got back from a beta reader. I only had one beta reader on it. That's all I really needed. She's part of my writing group, so she knows the series. She knows the character. It was actually an interesting exercise, because I've written this character. I'm into book number 3. The character has evolved in 3 books, and that's fun. It's fun to write a character and then kind of look back at him or her and say, oh, look, in the beginning of the series, he or she was like this, and now they're like this. And so going back and writing something that comes before that first book, like, you're kind of going back in that, you're like writing a younger version of them. That was an interesting exercise. Like, he didn't have a girlfriend at this time, so I had to add those little, he's back flirting with the bartender again. So it was fun to write a version of the character that I hadn't visited in a while. But so the beta loved it. She said it was really great. Loved the ending, which I don't feel like I do good endings. I feel like my endings are always a little soft. And she said the ending was perfect. So that's done, and I'm going to have that off to the editor on Friday. And so now I'm also working on a story for Patreon. I've got a couple of new ones that I'm going to get through with in the next couple of weeks, while also, kind of rewriting the novel that comes next. I'm kind of like doing three or four things at once. None of it really diving headlong. I'm committed to my writers group, following through and finishing this book as my editorial support. And so and we've had a hard time getting back after the holidays, just because people are traveling and there's been some hangups. So it has slowed down the writing of the novel, but it's allowed for time to write these other things, which I'm also as committed to. So yeah, it's been good. It's been fruitful. Like rewriting has become, it's just, I'm doing so much of it. It's become like I used to not look forward to it, but I do now. Because it is a whole nother thing. It's, I like adding those details and those flourishes and finding just one last little
finessing too, and making it finished. I love finishing energy.
Yeah. What are you reading?
Speaking of finishing it, I finished a romance novel called The Baker's Man by Jennifer Moorman.
Ooh.
And that was
Bake me a cake as fast as you can.
It was a magical realism romance. So that was what that one was. And then, so I'm still reading Bones Would Rain from the Sky, but like we talked about, some other stuff has been jumping in the stack. And one of them is this book, Profit First. So this is a business book that Rachel and Sasha talked about on their podcast, The Black Heron. Do you know about that podcast?
I do not.
The two of them together, Sasha Black and Rachel Heron, monthly have a chat, and they record it, and they both put it out on their podcasts once a month as part of their regular feed. I don't know if it's just for patrons, actually. I don't think it's just for patrons, but the patrons get it early, maybe. Anyway, they were talking about, they have kind of like a book club, I guess, that the two of them decide to read a book and talk about it. And that was one that Rachel really recommended. So I wanted to grab it. So that's probably going to jump the stack. I'll probably read that next. What about you?
I'm still working on Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Great book, but it is so dense. And it's one of those, it's so sciencey. And for me, like, I don't have a lot of science knowledge. I have enough science knowledge to be dangerous and listen to scientists. So when I'm reading this book, I find myself just having to put it down and just think about the ideas of, it deals a lot with evolution. It deals a lot with evolution gone right and wrong. And it deals with it in a really intimate, personal way. And so, yeah, I'm still reading it. It's really good. It's just so dense that it leads to a lot of walks. It leads to a lot of like, all right, I got to ponder that idea. I mean, the basic premise is that, we've found a planet we can go to, and we've terraformed it. We've sent out some things to make it more habitable. But what we've sent out to those planets, that planet has gone wrong. Like, it evolved, and then the evolution like kind of jumped, and it's in a scary way. But he really goes into the science of it. Like, here's how that could happen, and here's how it happened. The process of it happening. Yeah, so it's super in depth. But my son and I are also are reading Goosebumps. So on the lighter side of things, we started reading the first Goosebumps book. That's our read together book. You want to talk about like the basics of mystery in one, like R.L. Stine. Wow. Like it's like this book, he's going to get through these couple of these books, and he's going to know every mystery and horror trope imaginable. And because that guy pulls out every one of them in such a lovely way, like, all right, this is the part of the story where the kid tries to convince their parents that they've seen a ghost, and their parents aren't going to believe them. That's every horror movie, that's every horror movie like this. There's that scene. It's so much fun. So
did that jump the stack for The Farthest Shore?
We finished that. Oh yeah, we finished that.
Okay.
Which is, very lyrical and poetic, and all these high concepts.
Has got much higher pacing.
Yeah. He's like, let's just, let's read a couple of chapters, Dad. Like, we've got a few minutes to kill. Let's just read some chapters, and so much fun. So you need a little fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We are talking today about professional relationships. And
so I wanted to point out right off that that anybody listening to this podcast is listening to one. This is, you and I met when 12 years ago at a Willamette Writers Conference, struck up a friendship. Friendship in this world is tied with business because we both pursue and do the same things.
And talk
And
shop. I
so,
love talking shop with you, which is how
absolutely.
this podcast came about.
Right. So when we're talking about professional relationships, like this is the way they can evolve. They can evolve into projects that you do with people. And I think that's like, I think we're like a kind of a shining example of a professional relationship that just works.
Yes. And then on the flip side, ones that don't work are, let's see, ones that can turn not necessarily toxic, but like they don't serve their purpose anymore, or the one that went south for me that I always use as an example, and I probably have talked about it on the podcast already, is early on in my editing career, you take whatever clients you can get, whatever jobs you can get.
Right.
And I had one that was actually not an editing job, though I thought it was at the beginning. So she hired me, and it was an ongoing repeating client, but she was a college student that didn't speak English as her first language. She was deaf. And so she spoke ASL with her hands and wrote in ASL. So every single sentence had to be rewritten in English. And so that was a translation job, not an editing job. And because they were college assignments, she would get an assignment on a Monday, she would do the work by the end of the week. And then she'd send it to me like on a Thursday or Friday, and it would be due like that night or something, and so it was always a rush job. And it was hard because it wasn't in my wheelhouse. It wasn't editing. It was something else. So it became, when I started cringing with every single email that I would get from her, I finally recognized, okay, this is not a good, this is not a good professional relationship.
Right.
And so I ended up firing that client, and just said, I can't do it anymore. And I don't even remember what excuse I gave, but it was something professional.
Right.
And yeah, so knowing when a relationship is no longer serving you is important. And that takes some self-reflection and awareness as a business person, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it takes awareness in the course of the relationship, as that kind of relationship is reaching its end. It's important to recognize it. Like, this relationship isn't working. I need to get out of it. And the other side of that is like now using that knowledge to recognize when those, well, first off, I think I'm really good at becoming, I don't want to say chummy with the people that I have as clients, but we spend a lot of time together. So I like to present, I'm not just going to call up and say like, time for interview, how are you doing? Having a cordial relationship. How's your family? How's your, but you also have to remember that is a professional relationship, and you're really here doing a job. They're paying you and you're providing a service. So that whole idea that your friends can get in the way of, or being friendly, or being that can get in the way of creating those professional boundaries. So I think I run into that a lot, where people, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do a project, and then we're going to do another project, and then it becomes chummy. And then the boundaries start to slip a little bit. When those boundaries slip, I've got one right now where the person's always like, all right, I'm going to hire you for X and Y. And then always by the end of the project, because we're buddies now, it's X, Y, and Z. There's always an addition. Well, you enjoyed this project, so let's add this other layer to it. Those kind of things really, it makes it's hard. It's just hard to put up, to be friendly, but also put up a boundary around your friendship. because not everything's a partnership.
Ooh, I have so much to say about that. Let's see if I can
Then
break it down.
spin it. Go for it.
Um, yes, the how to be friendly and not friends is really hard for so many people, especially if you're an outgoing person, or if you know, are gregarious, or if you are just chummy, you know, anyway. Um, I guess trying to, oh man, that's a really hard line, because you do want to be professional. And, you know, sometimes, like, because you're working with a client for so long as a ghostwriter, you know, you're spending half the year with them, if not more.
Easily half the year.
Yeah. Or if you have a long time coaching client or something like that, where you're working with a person for a prolonged period of time, you know, there's, especially in coaching, you know, it ends up being kind of not therapy, you know, but there's an element of, this is my life and this is why I'm not getting my work done, or I'm stuck in the manuscript, so maybe it's because of this and this, and you know, like there's real life that bleeds into it, and so you are talking about things other than just the manuscript sometimes. And that is a boundary slippage too, in some ways, or it can be. Um, Sometimes I work with clients, and I think it's part of my job to recognize when what we're talking about is in service to the project. If it is personal stuff that's getting in the way of writing, that's part of writing a book too, learning about how to compartmentalize that, or learning how to use that as fuel for writing, or you
Right.
know, there's a lot of things that you can, as a book coach, you can use some of their personal stuff that they're bringing to the sessions, you know, as
As
homework, I
fodder,
guess, you know.
fuel, yeah,
Yeah,
material.
for the project. But it's still my job also to like bring the conversation back to the book, you know, every single
Right.
time.
Right.
um so yeah, boundary slippage is a little bit hard, and can manifest in different places, like the X, Y, and Z part. I have another client. I forgot about this client. I did fire this client at one point. Actually, no, I didn't. I've worked with her repeatedly, and if there is a job that she wants me to do that I don't feel is in my wheelhouse, or it's not, or it's just not something I do, then I have become really good at communicating that with her. And so thankfully, you know, as we build these relationships with clients and colleagues, it's a learning opportunity too. And so
Right.
we're growing and evolving as communicators and colleagues, and setting those boundaries. So now because of my relationship, my professional relationship with some clients, I have become much better at setting those boundaries and keeping them, and communicating what I do exactly, and what I could do exactly for them, and exactly how much it would cost for that project. And, you know, if they choose to work with me, great. That's the boundaries I've set. But I've
Yeah.
I recognize it's very important to do that upfront first, before the
And
chumminess happens. You know what I mean?
right. And I think
Especially if the chumminess has already entered in.
right. And look, chummy is sort of my business plan. So it's hard for me not. I can't sell somebody on you're going to talk to me every week or twice a week, or you know, without me being like, you're going to have hard conversations with me. Like I've made, you know, I remember a client, this is the truth, this British Marine who'd been through all of it, you know, who'd done awful things, had seen awful things. And we'd have these phone calls, and he, you know, he'd said at one point, "You're the hardest thing I've ever had to do involving my military career. I've done everything. but this is the hardest thing ever talking to you because we're talking about real stuff. It's hard. I can't sell you on like, this is what we're going to have to do and be like a robot. I'm not a bot. I could be replaced by one, but I'm not. Um, so that's for me always the hard part is like, how do I keep you, how do I keep you on task and keep you moving and treating me professionally? And we should, shift the conversation now a little bit to, I have a lot of people who, like, I have a client right now. She owes me well, we're kind of in the middle of a project benchmark. She's put up a big delay. She wants to keep going, but there's money out there. And so, professionally, I plan my projects around finishing things at certain times. When I finish something, I get paid, so I budget accordingly. Now you're telling me this is going to take 6 months instead of 3. I have to be able to say, look, I know that we're very friendly and I'm going to give you all the leash you need, but let's talk about this next payment that I now have to wait twice as long for. Can we split it in 2? What can we do? I think in professional relationships, you have to be comfortable asking for the same accommodations that other people are asking of you. Otherwise, that give and take is just take, and that's not comfortable. So the ask has to work both ways. Like in every relationship, you can't have a one-sided personal relationship where you're always doing the favors and the other person won't do the favor, So I think you have to be comfortable with the mutual ask.
I am not comfortable with the mutual ask, I have to say.
Like you're not comfortable doing it or believing
if
you
I
have
were
a
in your
right.
position, I don't think I would feel comfortable saying, I need your payment now, even though the work isn't done because you're
Well,
delaying, that would
okay.
be
So
really hard for me to do.
I spent this whole weekend sort of like, how am I going to bring this up? And
Right.
so she owes me a considerable amount, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask her for half of it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've met, I don't want to spend the next 10 minutes talking about it, but like I've
Right.
done enough of that work, and we
Mm-hmm.
should be getting close to done. And she keeps saying like, I'm really sorry. I'm putting up a delay here. I have this other project I'm doing, and she's legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not BS. So yeah, I'm actually on my to-do list today is
Mm-hmm.
breach the
Email
topic
yeah. Uh-huh.
and just say, hey, I understand I can hang, but I think we've reached a point where we should split the next payment in half. But I
Yeah,
think she'll say,
that makes sense because there have been times where I've, given a project price for an editing job and gotten into it and realized, oh no, like this is
this is more.
way harder than I thought it was going to be. It's going to take me 3 times longer than I thought it was, but I want to meet the deadline, so I'm going to be killing myself to do this job. And yeah, so there have been a couple of times in my career where I have emailed the client and said, just described basically that, like, this is going to take longer than I thought, or whatever. Like, this
Right.
wasn't as ready for editing as I can't remember the examples I've
Right.
used or reasonings, but I have given them options. And that's my tip, I guess, is that when you do have to have a hard conversation with a client about money, especially, giving them like 2 or 3 options that they can choose from so they feel empowered to make a choice
Right.
for themselves. And it's not just me saying, I need more money, or,
Right.
this is going to take too long, I'm moving the date or whatever, So basically, I give like, okay, here's the options. I can stop editing now and give you the document and you can finish it yourself and we're done, with payment. Or I need this much more to finish the job,
Right.
or, something else. And I give 2 or 3 options, and, you know, sometimes they are like, fine,
Yeah.
here's more money. And other
Right.
times are like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to be that. Let me go fix some and then I'll bring it back to you. So there's different options. And I feel like that is a nice professional way to maintain relationships, when they're potentially could go south. Like, if once you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, that's a big red flag for you to check in with yourself and find out like what boundary is being crossed right here, what need of
Right.
yourself is not being met.
Right. Now
And
let's shift this. Well, I
yeah,
want to shift this a little bit
okay.
to, I started off, I mentioned us, like you and I have a professional relationship, a friendship. I would say like we're an exception to most of the relationships that most people make in the writing world. Like I feel like we've evolved
Hmm.
in different ways, like, you know, like different branches of the same tree. Like we're working towards the same things, we're doing it differently. I think a lot of the relationships we talking about, not just the professional, you're hiring me, it's the let's collaborate, let's do a project together, let's co-write something, though, let's beta read, all of those things, those those are professional relationships too, even if there's not money tied
Hmm.
to them. Even
Yeah.
if you're not hiring somebody to read your beta book, or, you know, whatever, like whatever those, because I think to build a writing career you have to develop relationships, you can't do it in a silo, but you also have to be aware that not everyone is an LTR, you know, not every relationship is going to be one that goes on for a long time. I think we have to acknowledge sometimes that your writing group you might have 4 or 5 friends in that writing group and someone might drop off. It's okay to say, all right, it's time to replace that person. I need the writing group, but this person isn't fulfilling that. I think it's important just to recognize that, like, it's uncomfortable, but we have to, if we're moving our writing forward and we're making relationships and doing it, some of those relationships sunset, and you've got to be comfortable moving on.
Yes. And
Not a
I think the way to take the sting out of that is is kind of just like the way you critique and give positive constructive feedback, like that compliment sandwich, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So looking at the relationship as a whole, seeing what has worked in the past, and then identifying how it's not working now, whether because you're not getting the thing that you got before that was working, or if like something's totally changed in your process and you don't need this anymore and you need something different. You know, you're talking
Right.
about like the writing group. Like I spent 10 years in the same writing group, and then it got to the point where it was messing with my writing process.
Right.
So I had to leave. And, you know, I
And that's
made,
hard because
yeah,
because you do a little bit of,
relationships that
yeah,
you
you're talking about stuff
nurtured
before.
for years. Yeah. So I think when you're approaching the end of a relationship with a colleague or a client, you know, looking at what has worked, telling them, you know, I'm so appreciative of this stuff that we've, you know, accomplished together. You know, I got so much out of this relationship. Thank you so much. And now here is blah, blah, blah. Maybe avoid saying but,
Right.
because
Right.
that
And
negates
yeah.
all of the things before,
Right.
you know,
Right.
like this was all
I love you,
great.
but yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and now this is what I need. And it's not fair to ask that of you, or it's not, you know, something I know that is what this writing group is
Right.
about, for instance, or whatever. And so I'm going to be moving on. And thank you so much
It's
for this opportunity.
right. It's important to understand that you're really, like, you might have had similar parallel goals at one point, but maybe that
Hmm.
changes, you know, or maybe, and this is always the hard one. It's like, I always, I was taught half of the lesson, and half that lesson is you should be friends with the people you want to be, like, you know, you befriend the people, dress like the job you want, that kind of thing, befriend and associate with the people in the positions you want to be. That's half of it. You should
Hmm.
have aspirational relationships, befriend people who are a step ahead of you in this path, but also you have to remember that befriend people who are just on the same path as you. Like, you don't have to befriend all of your mentors. And I think it's fine to say at one point, like, hey, we're just not going to collaborate anymore, or we're not, you know, this relationship nurtured this part of my journey, but this part of my journey is now not the one you're on. and it's time to make a change.
Mhm.
Because I think that's just being authentic with all of with
Yeah.
every part of, what being a friend or a collaborator means, is that you
Yeah.
can't, and yeah, I have a collaborator that I'm reaching that sunset with,
Mhm.
and he and I, it just doesn't, it doesn't work anymore. um and not because he's wrong or I've done
Yeah,
something
no
wrong. It's
fault
yeah,
to anybody, just
yeah,
doesn't fit
different
anymore.
different road here, different road there, and now we're like, what do we do? You could spend a lot of energy trying to, you shouldn't never put that energy into like don't restate your goals to keep a relationship going, because that's, your goals are your goals.
Yes, and
There you go. There you go. Yes,
um,
and
so the writing group I talked about that I was in for 10 years, the reason why I was in the same writing group for 10 years is because we did check in with each other and say, hey, I know we meet on Tuesday nights, but there's this really important class that I, feel called to do. I would like to stay in the book, in the group, and I would like to take this. How do you all feel about changing the day that we
right,
meet on? So you can make the ask, he was perfectly willing to not be in the writing group for like the 8 weeks that the class was going to be on, but he preferred to meet.
right,
So if we didn't have any, conflict, could we change it? And we did, so there were people that made asks through the years, and we did accommodate them. So if you do get to a place in a relationship when it's just not quite working, but a lot of things are, you can try to tweak it, have a conversation,
right,
communicate, be
right,
authentic, and make the ask, and be willing to hear no.
right. And you also have to do that with yourself. Like, that
Yeah.
conversation with yourself is, does this continue to align with my values, my goals? Like, I've had relationships with people where I can just, I feel this divergence from just like the goals that I have and just the values that I want to bring to things. um, I'm not going to realign my professional or personal values to maintain a relationship if someone's steering away from those.
Hmm.
That's when you have to move, because that, values are expensive. You spend a lot of your life building those. Don't compromise them. And as are your goals. Like, I'm not going to say you get one shot at the writing life, but like, if your goal is to self-publish, let's say, romance novels, and your writing group is like, not supporting, not willing to support that, or not supportive of that, or you're feeling like you're getting a lot of like, feedback you don't need, don't change what you're doing to fit their, what they're willing to help you with. Like, I don't know, that's probably a bad example, but I just feel like you have to be aligned with what you're doing. When you go off of that, you lose time and traction and integrity.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So being authentic means listening to yourself and knowing what your values are and knowing what your goals are and knowing when you're compromising them. It's going to feel bad. It's not going to work anymore. And that kind of energy in your business is not useful. So
And
doing the
that's the kind of
hard
energy
thing, yeah,
that
like you
bleeds over
said,
into life too. Like,
yeah, for
that's, yeah,
sure. And like you said, it's going to be uncomfortable, but people evolve and relationships change, and that's okay. That's part of the process of living and running a business.
right, right. And pursuing something that is as challenging as a writing life. It is not, there is no professional credential that says you are a writer now. You can, it's not like you get tenured into this and then can just write whatever you want. Every book's a journey. We talk about this. Every
Mhm.
story, every client's a journey. So you have to constantly be aligned and in touch. Otherwise, that gets tough.
So, yeah. So in conclusion,
Hmm.
if you want to nurture a relationship, um, things that you could do for that are, again, communication, checking in with what your collaborators' needs are, and communicating your needs, making boundaries, reinstilling boundaries that have slipped, stating, what's working in the relationship, having gratitude and flexibility. If you want to nurture a relationship, flexibility and communication, I think, are two of the biggest aspects of that. And if you want to end a relationship, compassion is important for yourself, and like assuaging that guilt that you might have for ending something. And again, communicating, and I think the professionalism comes from being kind and clear.
Oh yeah.
I think that's kind of you were talking about values. I think those are the values of my professionalism, being clear and being kind. And if I can do those two things, then I feel like I am professional.
Yeah. And, in conclusion, I would just say, make relationships, make them, bond with people. You're at a writer's conference, talk to that person, be open to that relationship going wherever. Just understand that not every one of those relationships is going to be that forever writer relationship. Some of them, hey, we were buddies for a while. We worked on a project. Now we've moved on. That's okay. It's perfectly okay.
Perfectly okay. Thanks for talking with me about that. It was super interesting.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next week, we're going to be talking about mailing list maintenance.
Oh boy.
It's going to be a combo episode of like some strategic how-to tips, and then also just like the philosophy and the why that you would want to maintain a list. And by maintain, we mean like cleaning it up and keeping it current and being engaged with the mailing list. So
the people on it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Keep them involved, keep them interested.
Yeah. All right.
Happy
writing, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye for now.
Bye.